half an hour. Thank you. It's perfect. Thank you. And now, my paper was sent, but I don't think that it was distributed, but anyway, it will be available. And even this paper is, in its way, a synthesis, because if we consider, as I said yesterday, that theory and practice cannot be separated, and that the challenge to which facing the popular working class movements throughout modern capitalist history have changed from period to period. Marxism also has been able to innovate. I have not a religious look at Marxism, that you have the holy writings in the time of Marx, and anything which goes beyond it is a deviation, religious language and religious concept. Marxism is living, and it has and it does innovate and change. Now, and history has proven it. In my paper, I consider only the two major revolutions in the name of socialism, the Russian and the Chinese. There are some others, but I focus on that. And I look at how the major leaders, all of them, the one who won and the one who were defeated, have considered the response to the challenges to which their people were facing. That is Lenin, but also Trotsky, also Stalin, Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, but also Deng Xiaoping. Now, all of them have been facing a double challenge, which was unexpected before. The challenge of, let's say, call it the enormous agrarian question, and the challenge of hostility of imperialism, of global capitalist imperialism. Now, in countries which were in the periphery of the global capitalist system of their time, or semi-periphery perhaps, but I don't want to go into too much detail. And therefore, the historical change towards socialism and eventually communism did not start from the most advanced capitalist centers, but from the periphery, and continued to be so. If you look at Vietnam, Cuba, and other countries. So, whether that was considered by Marx as possible or not is an important question, but I shall not deal with it. I have written some things on that. Marx, I think, hesitated, and that is normal, absolutely normal, between, yes, it is possible, the correspondence, particularly with respect to China, to Russia, but also with respect to China, with Zasowicz, with respect to Russia, but also hesitating on some other opportunities. Now, that's not the point I want to raise here. The fact that the revolution started in the peripheries has brought this enormous agrarian question. The question being, do this massive majority, large majority even, of peasants can be associated, integrated in a process of socialist development, stages towards socialism and later communism, or not? Now, the dominant opinion within the Western vision of history, including partly Marx, was that probably no. You have to go first to a capitalist development which will reduce through capitalist agricultural development the peasantry to a negligible small proportion. That was the European road. Now, and the common idea within the bourgeois, Rostov, stages of growth, but also within the socialists, at least of the Second International, Kautsky, was that you have to go through that stage, reproducing in some way the European history. European history, this pattern was possible for Europe for two reasons. One is that the pattern of industries of the 19th century were labor consuming and could absorb gradually, even in hard look at Engels on the conditions of the working class in England, but absorb them. Second, they have this gigantic out-migration. Europeans were 15% of the global population in 1500. In 1900, European and European descent, that is the Americas, basically 30%. Out-migration allowed to create a second Europe. That road is closed, completely closed, for the rest of humankind today. Because one, we cannot reproduce technologies which are of the past. We have to go immediately into relatively modern technologies. And second, because we don't have, we would need 5 or 6 or 10 Americas. I mean, the out-migration presently is a drop in the ocean as compared to the need. Therefore, this is closed. Then, how did the Russians, the Soviets, and the Chinese dealt with this peasant agrarian question? Lenin was put in front of a fait accompli. That is, even before the October Revolution, during the summer, and the disaggregation of the Russian army, the peasants have gone back to their land and seized the land as private small owners. It was a fait accompli. And he had to, therefore, the question, can they be integrated in a process of a revolution which considers itself and has sincerely the target of building socialism? NEP was an attempt to do that by combining partly market, we could call it market socialism if we want, and industrialization, planned industrialization, and dominant state and collective property. Now, after that, Stalin moved, as you know, to collectivization of the land. Collectivization of the land was not considered as something totally new. The pattern that the Westerners had of the development of agriculture, including Kautsky, was that in agriculture we need to move from small farms to large farms, modernized, on the pattern of industries. That was the vision. And therefore, the idea of collectivization was to have also large farming on the pattern of industries. That was not an idea which appeared curious at that time. It was the very general opinion of the bourgeois and including the Marxists of that time to have that. But simultaneously, and I'll come to that problem later, it was associated with giving priority to industrialization and armament, with good reasons. With good reasons. And therefore, a pattern of financing that industrialization and armament through pumping on the peasants. So, in some way, this broke the historical alliance of the working class and the peasantry, and created that situation which led finally to the fall of the Soviet experience. Now, China operated very differently from the very start. That is, Mao's concept was, in the language of Mao, anti-imperialist, anti-feudal. Democratic revolution. Now, which meant that he and the Chinese communists considered from the start that the peasantry represents a revolutionary force for change and not a counter-revolutionary or a neutral which can be manipulated but which has little weight. It has its weight by itself. Now, I think that the success of the Chinese Revolution is due to that strategy of integrating from the very start at least the vast majority of the poor, the small peasants, perhaps neutralizing the rich peasants and excluding the landlords, the big landlords, so-called feudal, in the process. Now that led on the road to socialism. China until now is not a socialist republic, it's the People's Republic of China. And is the pattern was integrating them from the very start, radical land reform, which was the fait accompli in Russia, but through considering land as a common good of the nation and of the peasants, and guaranteeing others on the various stages, patterns, experiences leading to the present situation, in which land continues to be a common good and it's not a private property, even if there are some pressures in that direction. Now, these, in my paper, I also refer to the Thermidor comparison with the French Revolution. That is after a first phase of relative apparent radicalization, moving a little back to stabilize the possibility of the revolution to start changing the world. Which I don't consider Thermidor is not a synonymous to restoration. Restoration is restoring what was in the past. Thermidor is trying to stabilize the revolution in order to allow eventually further revolutionary advances. Now, the second challenge was that of imperialists. Now, on that ground, I'm critical to the Lenin concept of imperialism as the later stage of capitalism. I think historical capitalism, again, not an abstract model, historical capitalism, which started in the small triangle, London, Amsterdam, Paris, say, Northwest Europe, has been continuously and permanently imperialist from the very start, from the mercantilist period of transition from 1500 to 1800 until now and the invisible future. That is, it has continuously shaped, if not the whole world at once, part of the world, as peripheries depending and permitting the acceleration of a capitalist accumulation in the centers. In that sense, it has always been imperialist. For instance, the so-called British hegemony of Britain in the 19th century, or for part of the 19th century, could not be understood without the colonization of India. It is India which has done the hegemony of Britain, and not the reverse. It's not the hegemony which has permitted to the British to conquer India. And so on. So, I'm saying imperialism, the permanent stage of capitalism, of historical capitalism, not the latest. But Lenin thought that the revolution started in a semi-periphery, he called it the weak link, but that it would move fast to the centers through the German Revolution. Now, that did not happen, and therefore the Russian Revolution was confronted to a challenge. Is it possible to coexist for a long historical period with global capitalist imperialist system? The global capitalist system declared the war immediately. That is, the Cold War did not start after the World War II. The Cold War was permanent from 1970s to today, even after the fall of the Soviet Union. And I would say that there is a soft Cold War against China, which was also permanent from 1949 to today, in a different way. Therefore, there was this challenge. Now, the choice of Lenin and of Stalin was peaceful coexistence, try to get it, and simultaneously accelerating industrialization and armament, defense capacity, which was a correct choice. Neither. There was no other alternative to it. There was no alternative. Did they do it correctly, not fully correctly? We can discuss that. But the principle was there. The West never accepted peaceful coexistence. Never. At no point. Neither after World War II. The Cold War was started by the US, not by Stalin. After Potsdam, because they had the nuclear weapon in their hand. Now, a parenthesis also, I have no time to go into it, but it is in the paper. 1947 or 47, the Truman Doctrine of the free world, the West, and the totalitarian communist world, the East. Zhdanov, 1 year later, produced a report saying the same, but calling things differently, the socialist world and the capitalist world. We in the South, and I mean many communists in Asia and Africa, did not accept this doctrine. We say there are not two worlds, but at least three. Because the colonies and semi-colonies, the nations of the periphery oppressed by imperialists, are not part of the so-called free world. What does it mean, free for whom? And therefore, there is a natural, potential alliance between the struggle of these nations and people for reconquering their independence and the struggle for moving beyond capitalism to socialism and communism. Now, but then the question was, who will lead that anti-imperialist, potentially anti-capitalist, I would not say non-capitalist, but anti-capitalist, let's call it revolution or revolutionary advances, or process of revolutionary advances. Who will lead it? 1945, it was declared by Stalin that the bourgeoisie, including the European bourgeoisie, have all, he used the sentence, dropped the national flag in the mud. That they accept the US imperialist leadership and, and capitulate. But Chinese Revolution, understood as a national, democratic, popular revolution, not national, democratic, bourgeois revolution. And this is a big difference. Democratic revolution, but popular democratic, not bourgeois democratic. Created the conditions for what appeared a few years later, 5 years later, in Bandung, 1955. That is a historical alliance between the, with all degrees, national popular, and I'm saying national popular, not socialist, but not clearly bourgeois also, movements and revolutions in the South, in Asia and Africa. Now, that was suggesting that contrary to the view of Stalin of 1945, the bourgeoisie, or at least the potential bourgeois class, could lead the movement or capture the movement rather than lead it, and through the use of the state and the wide room of maneuver open to them against imperialism, compel imperialism to retreat partly and create the condition for a national capitalist development, not a national socialist development. And that was different patterns from one country to another, but maybe 30 or 40 countries experienced that. So it's not small, and including large countries like India, and important countries, even if not much larger, in the Arab Middle East and elsewhere, a variety. But because of the Soviet Union, and that gave to Soviet Union the possibility of breaking its isolation, of having a rise and therefore having a play in the international politics and a room of maneuver. It was positive, and positive for everybody, compelling imperialism to retreat, partly, and to adjust, the opposite of structural adjustment. We should adjust. Congo should adjust to the demands of the United States, and not United States adjust to the needs of development of Congo. It was the opposite. The West had to adjust partly to demands. Now, so that was very ambiguous. But it has achieved, and achieved a lot, and I would say positive, historically, but found its limits, because it was not precisely the Mao strategy of a national, popular, democratic popular revolution or advances. And once it got out of steam, 1955, Bandung, 1985 or 82, Cancun and Reagan saying that we know better than them what they need, which means re-establishing counter-offensive, out of which came the present pattern of neoliberal globalization. And therefore, it appears that the bourgeois dream of the South of a national capitalist way of development did not exist, and there was no room for that. But at the very moment that the imperialists seemed to be successful 100%, remember after the breakdown of the Soviet Union and during the 5 or 10, the 90s, say, the atmosphere and the discourse of the end of history and all this nonsense, and capitalism is there forever and it is good for everybody and there is no other alternative, which turned to be terribly ugly and negative, etc., etc. At the very moment, after a very short time of apparent success, then it is this neoliberal globalization which moves into a deep decadence, I would not say even crisis. But that doesn't mean that it is not more and more aggressive because of that precisely. And reappear the idea that there is another way possible, the so-called emerging country, compelling the globalization to move from unilateral dictatorship of the US with their subordinate allies, Europe and Japan, towards a polycentric pattern of globalization, which is a possibility, a very high possibility. But to do what? To go where? A multi-polarity to try to have new, completely capitalist, national capitalist, but belonging to a new pattern of negotiated globalization, not imposed unilaterally, or to move ahead towards the alternative, that is the perspective of socialism. And this is the new challenge to which I think communists and Marxists of our time, we are all faced with this challenge. I will not, in one or two sentences, give an answer to it, because I think it would be totally arrogant and ridiculous, because this will be answered by the struggles of millions and hundreds of millions of people. But I hope that the communists will be able to innovate within, and that would be a new wave of success, of development of Marxism. Thank you.